Deep neural networks with internal selective attention through the feedback connections. This paper review by me, it's actually saying how psychology has actually intended to come inside the AI-based system. There has been a lot of approaches which has been taken from psychology, but yet I feel this is one of the approaches which actually can make sense in order to build a brain on a burning. Contact the authors? Yes, you can do that. They are given their mail, and I think you guys can check this out. A brief intro on what the psychology. Selective attention is an important of an consciousness more effective in terms of grabbing the information and also in terms of living the thoughts. Probably this can help to effectively make an human more humanely conscious and keeping the mind active in terms of attention mechanism. This is one of the video which can say that. So do check it out in the slides. What can the biological paradigm? The deep convolution neural network have a lot of pooling layer, backpropagation, and have other state-of-the-art object detect other which they are useful in extracting the information. Thus, this is the progression of the progressive approaches in order to give consciousness into a neural network architecture. It seems funny, but yes, this is one of the approaches in order to get that right. Evolution has discovered efficient feedback pathways for recognizing certain objects in the blink of the eye. However, experts in ornithology asked to classify birds belonging to one of the two species. This was one of the challenges which they faced. Now, since human benefits greatly from this strategy, we have to see how this research can move on. The psychology and the AI can go hand in hand once we demystify how the brain works. I think probably this was one of their approach in order to demystify what consciousness can be. There are a lot of podcasts which Lex Fridman does on consciousness. Do check it. Training was their main aim, but for the usefulness of the internal CNN filter automatically omitting the manual inspection, that means redundancy in the compute has been reduced. This paper is basically for the deep attention in selective network, DASNet, which models the selective attention in the deep CNNs by allowing each layer to influence all other layers for successfully passes over an image through specific connection. There can be dropout layers, there are bottom-up, top-down approaches which have been given, just like how hardware works. After the CNN has trained usual way of supervised learning, there can be an implementation of reinforcement learning also. In future, this paper says that deep attention selective network, DASNet, is just a mathematical approximation of what convolution, multiplication, and the summations can do. This is a standard max out net which is augmented to allow the filters to be weighted different on different passes over different network parameters and also in collecting different information. Lot of speculations here and there. How can psychologists influence deep learning and AI? DASNet is one of an approach. Through special connections, bottom-up and a top-down approach, which we use in rigging up the circuits in electronics, or can be in order to analyze one of the software entity. Control policy that is learned from the network is most useful here. The system filter automatically emitting the manual inspection, that's what it always meant. In the current implementation, separable natural evaluation strategies instead of convolution single agent reinforcement learning methods take hectic amount of compute or a million and a billion parameters to control CNN size typically used for image classification. There are a lot of ways in which you can also implement. There can be influence of the probability, there can be influence of the strength of the way in which the electronic magnetic waves are being propagated in the medium can be an influence here also. But all these things And giving a thought process of analyzing and implementing in a network takes a huge task. Thus, the trial had to happen. This was experimented on a publicly available Cipher 10 dataset and Cipher 100 dataset. There are different classes, different set of data which can be used, and also there are a lot of ways in which you can really work upon. Emphasizing and de-emphasizing certain filters, outperforming a previous state-of-the-art CNN is their main approach. CNNs have typically changed the world, but yet there are a lot of new techniques, just like breast nets. There are convolution neural network developed for specific purpose. Thus, makes a lot of sense here. If for again this thing comes up, but yet evolution has discovered that efficient way of recognizing through the blink of an eye. Probably you can read Fei Li's PhD thesis on getting what a gaze can do on an image. That was our PhD thesis, and it's an amazing thesis. I'll be linking the PDF in the description below. Max Out Network is one of the underlying model for the DASnet. It's actually one of the approaches where the CNN has been modified by a lot of strategies and the psychological implementations. Thus, this is a state-of-the-art object detection and recognition model. It consists basically of convolution layer. As told, convolution is the key, which helps in dimensionality reduction, max pooling, and other techniques can be used. Filters are being deployed, but yet convolution is the main task. Why GPUs? Because game computing also has a lot of matrix multiplication, and our field, deep learning, also has a lot of multiplication of matrices. Pooling layer, as always, it's always the max pool, thus sequential.maxpool. Classification layer, it's actually the correlation between what the feature is and what's the input data in a dynamic approach. Thus, do read this slide in order to get what this classification layer is all about. It's not about I is equals to 0 from the previous what we had. It's always about how we are getting the right approaches. Changing parameters in a CNN might not give the right, but yet changing the thought process in which the CNN is abstracting the data is the approach here. While averaging map activation provides a lot of computation meaningful enough in order to allow the selection of the good action. That means good attributes, also process in which they are extracting the information. This has to happen as reduction in the dimensionality has to happen in order to give less amount of computational burden onto the model. This is one of the way in which they are describing the architecture. Do check this slide in order to understand what this architecture is all about. Maps are everywhere. Max out, softmax is one of the activation function. There are classes in which the object detection model trains. Related works, human vision has been there. I can also give you one of the example which Justin Johnson has been working. Genomic vision, a similar approach in which he has given out how the scene can be predicted from a single image. This is the result dashboard, probably, where they are working in terms of getting the results done on different set of data set. Can be Cipher 10 or can be Cipher 100. This is one of the facets in which they are describing the classes which have been studied and also the successful deployment of these models. You can also try building this model. Code can be available. Do check out the GitHub. Conclusion. DASnet is a deep convolution network where the feedback connections are learned through the reinforcement learning. These are ways in which they are going the hindsight. That means getting the thought process of the learning process into the neural network and making them learn. Guess via an additional insight in which an image can be represented in the network. DASnet successfully learned to correct and forward max out network. Future research will be considered more complex action that are specifically focused on or about the part of observed images. Thus, can also help in the previous paper, the end painting. Thank you.